This is my 97 GMC four-door, four-wheel drive dually, and needs a upper ball joint. And before I do the ball joint, I need to do a little bit of a video on how to check the front end on a vehicle. So what I'm going to do is you have to jack it up first. And I'm going to show where to jack it up at. Put a jack under the wheel right here on the passenger side. I'm going to start on the passenger side. I'm going to jack this up, and the reason why is because I want to check these tie rod ends. This is your outer tie rod end here. This is the lower ball joint. This is the lower A-frame on this vehicle. This is the upper A-frame and the upper ball joint. And this is, of course, your constant velocity, or CV joint for the front wheel drive. This is a stabilizer bar, and this is stabilizer link. And these are stabilizer link bushings, and a stabilizer link or stabilizer pin. It gets both names. This one has a cracked bushing on the bottom here. No worries, not going to hurt anything. Stabilizer, if the links are broken or something like that, it can cause a truck to you know, bounce around a little bit more instead of sitting still after it hits a bump, or going around a curve. It has a tendency to lean a little bit more than it should, but it's not that critical. But still, if they're cheap, so they're easy to change and they're cheap. Now I have to get underneath the truck and be facing the other direction. Right now I'm looking towards the back of the truck. I'm in front of all this steering stuff and looking towards the back. Well, I got to get on the other side of this and look towards the front so I can show the idler arm, which is on this side, a drag link that goes all the way across to the other side, and then we have a pitman arm over there that goes to the steering box. And all of those have a little small ball joint of their own in each one, and they can also be a very serious issue if they break because they're worn out. I'm getting ready to jack this up. I can put the jack either here or on the back side of this same part. There's another place, or where I got the jack right now, there's a little bit of a bridge, like a bar going across from the front side of the lower A-frame to the back side of it. Any of those places is good, as long as the jack is not rubbing against the tire when you pick it up. And you have to pick it up from the lower A-frame to make these checks. I don't have a jack stand under there. You don't need one to make this outer check, but you do for the inner check. And what I'm going to do first is grab the tire this way, and I'm going to put some muscle on it. Since it's off the ground, it'll turn. Good way to check your brakes too, if they're too tight or anything. You can feel it. If it's real hard to turn that, then your brakes are too tight. You might have a caliper issue. Anyway, we got a little bit of side play. And I am putting some muscle in it. I'm putting about 50 pounds on each hand, pushing back and forth. Just a little bit, not a lot. And I see where it is. It's a little bit of everything, because I checked this before. That's how I know about the ball joint that I got to change. So if we just got just a little bit on several joints, I could change all of them. The truck hardly gets any use, but I really don't have an issue with those. They're very, it's just not that much. I'll watch it. I might change them next year. Now I want to change this, or check this up and down play, or in and out on the, this is the ball joints. You got to push in there hard, 50 pounds or so. Nothing. Okay. Now I'll get a jack stand and show what's going on with those idler arm joints on there. Okay, now I'm underneath and I'm behind all of this stuff, looking out towards the front. And we have a little shock absorber here that's probably not that important, but it's there. It is in the way if I needed to change this drag link. The drag link is the part that goes from the tie rod end all the way across to the tie rod end on the driver's side. And it has a pitman arm attached to it, and that's where I'm tapping with my fingers there. That's the pitman arm. The pitman arm, it has a little ball joint right here on this end where this crown nut and the cotter pin is, and the other end back here, I don't know if it has a ball joint in there or just a shaft. I'm not sure, because it's got something different on it than what most idler arms have. It might just be particular to these trucks, because the older cars that I used to work on didn't have that type of idler arm. Anyway, I need two hands to test that. I mean, I can push on it a little bit with one hand, and we can get a little bit of play, but making me move the camera too so you can't see. Let me get the camera mounted on this little mount I have underneath here. I'm gonna shake this wheel a little bit and show we have just a little bit of pivot motion right here on the pitman arm. It's not a whole lot, I mean idler arm. It's not a whole lot, but it is a little bit. And when I used to do inspections on cars a long time ago, something like that, I would have told the customer about it. And if it was somebody that got a lot of driving on their car, then I would have told them that they need to change it. But if it was just somebody that, you know, didn't drive a whole lot, I'd say, well, let's take another look at that in about 6 months, see if it's getting any worse, because it'll probably go a couple of years like that before it really got bad. And we got the same thing right here, this inner tie rod end going into the drag link. We got just a slight little bit of play there too. It's not much, but I'm not going to change these parts now, but I might do them in the summer next year. We're just now getting into winter. This is November, the beginning of November, and so I'm going to change those probably next year, because this truck is going to sit all winter. It doesn't get much use, and it's just going to sit. So anyway, we're going to check the other side the same way, but I'm not going to do it on camera because it's identical. The only difference is this part right here, this idler arm, is mounted to the steering gearbox instead of mounted to the frame, and it's called a pitman arm on the driver's side. This is my upper ball joint on the driver's side. I'm going to back out so you can see where it is compared to everything else. It's right on that upper A-frame I'm pointing at. This is the lower A-frame. This is your tie rods here. My tie rods are pretty tight over here. We got, like I said a while ago, we have just a very slight amount of play on the inner tie rod on the passenger side, and we got about the same amount of play in about 2 or 3 more spots on the drag link and the idler arm, and all of them together are giving me just a little bit of noticeable play, but I'd have to change all of them to take that play out, because there's several of them that have a little bit. Now this has a lot. I'm going to come on in here. I'm going to go over there and grab that tire and shake it. You'll see what we got there. Now while I'm shaking that, right now I'm up above the tire looking at these places here that hold the upper A-frame on, these upper A-frame bushings. And while I'm shaking the tire, I'm also looking at these, the front and the back side, looking for play there, because that's another place that gets play on these things. And I don't see any on this side or the other side. And didn't see it on the bottom ones either. The bottom ones mount underneath the frame there, and on the frame under here. And so I didn't see any there. There's the bushings there. This is actually my lifting spring that holds my suspension up. It's a torsion bar. It acts like a twisting spring, and it's actually adjustable for how much lift you have underneath the truck. The old, way back in the 70s, there was a Chrysler product that had those. It was a mid-size car, and it had those underneath. Also, looking at my shocks, I don't see any oil leaking out of it. The skirts are still intact, they're not rusted out. When I work on this next summer, I'll probably change the shocks on it. I do have one shock in the back here that's leaking, and it needs to be changed. So I'll probably get all 4 of them next summer. If we look under here and see direct sunlight, we see it's all wet. That's because the shock is leaking oil. It's worn out and it's leaking oil. So if we're going to change one, we'll change all 4. You either do pairs, unless there's a reason why one of them broke for some reason by itself, that you're going to change one shock. Normally you do either the front shocks or the back shocks. You're going to do both at the same time. I'm going to show how to check your shocks on a car. I'm not going to do it on the big GMC because it's so big and heavy. I almost need 2 people to do a good job on it. This is a much smaller car. It's about 1/3 the size. So this is a little Ford Ranger. So anyway, you grab it where you're not going to dent it. You know, on the top of the fender is a good spot right there on this line. And then another hand on the bumper, and just push down. A quick, hard push down, and then it should go down and then come back up and then go back down just slightly and settle there in one spot. It should not keep bouncing. Same thing over here. It's important you watch where you put your hand so you don't put a dent in the hood. And do the same thing on the back shocks. That's how you check your shocks, aside from whether or not they have oil leaking or the bushings are worn out.